Normally we don't discuss Sifrei Musar, though we should. I would summarize. How would you summarize our Torah study? The three goals of our Torah study, or what we're trying to get out of what we're doing. I'd say I could sum it up in three words, which is midos, midos, midos. Okay, good. So that's our Musar for today. So we're seeing some Chavos Avavis this week. Is it Chovat HaLevavot or Chovot HaLevavot? So this was an argument I had with my father-in-law quite a few years ago, and it turns out it's Chovot HaLevavot. You can actually check that in the original Arabic, which is we have on our table here, and it's pretty clear that it's an Arabic form that Rabbeinu Bahye originally used, not a singular. Okay, good. So it should be Chovot, or in Ashkenazis Chavos Avavis. In the Shar HaPrishus, Prishus is what? Asceticism, which is separating oneself from this world, prishut. Now, prishut is not necessarily a good thing. Like lots of midas, it could be taken to extreme, and that's not what God wants. God doesn't mind if we eat meat and we're not celibate and we drink wine and things like that. But perhaps to limit those things. But then again, you do have extreme examples of tzaddikim who did practice those things. I would imagine that when people were, let's say, he gives the example of Eliyahu Navi and Elisha Navi being very extreme, extremely detached. They had hermit-like tendencies. Especially Eliyahu Navi could disappear for years. So while I don't believe Eliyahu Navi practiced, let's say, celibacy, doing like what he did, or like Rabbi Akiva. Then again, I think that's also when it says Rabbi Akiva was gone for 12 years and 12 years straight, never said anything to his wife. I think it's exaggerated. I think the understanding is that he would come home like once a year. And the whole point is that he decided to go back to yeshiva and continue his whole commitment. But it's not like he was 24 years without his wife, because what's the whole point of the pas basalo thing? If he's never actually near his wife, that makes no sense. And I think there are Mefarshim who have explained that. Either way, it says that there in chapter 6 of Shar Prishus, he mentions that there are people who practice these things in order to get closer to God. He said Elisha left his large-scale plowing operation. Elisha was apparently quite wealthy. He had servants, but he himself was helping with the plowing. And when Eliyahu Navi came by and cast his mantle upon him as a sign, here, you're next in line. So Elisha said, he dropped everything and followed him. And he says people like that used to go out to the deserts and other places and practice extreme aloofness in order to get closer to God and grow as prophets. Okay, good. So that teaches you just a general lesson about how to disconnect from this world. Now, I think that one of the goals is that perhaps if you want to have proper insights into behavior, midos, you need to do that occasionally. Remember, what does the Rambam say if a person lives in a crazy society? People are just nuts. He's talking about, by the way, human society. Whether Jewish or non-Jewish, Jew within a Jewish society or generally society, if people are just complete breakdown of morals, what do you got to do? The Rambam says, leave society, become a hermit. That is what is necessary in order to survive. And I remember one time, I'll begin this with the mashal, the mashgiach back in yeshiva was talking about the godless of a certain posek, that when he was sitting in the car with someone, he offered to help him stoke the coals. Why? He was playing with the manual transmission. You drive manual? A lot of cars here in Israel are manual, a lot of the cabbies. So you take a cab with your friends, you'll see the driver constantly turning that transmission. He doesn't just go into forward. It's like even when he's in drive, he's doing a lot of business. So the posek told him, I'll stoke the coals for you. I'll stoke the coals for you. So you continue driving. I'll do the stoking. He thought that that's what he's doing. The car runs on coals. Now, the mashgiach gave this as an example of a posek who's very disconnected. It's such a tzaddik. He's disconnected from this world. And I didn't like that. No, if you want to be able to decide halacha, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to understand that an internal combustion engine and internal combustion engine works on, what is it? It has fuel injection that's vaporized, and it causes the pistons to go. It has nothing to do with stoking coals. You just press the gas, and it causes that action. And how transmission works, because these are a question of malacha on Shabbos and in Yontif. So if the posek is disconnected too much, he's not actually qualified to render opinions on what's going on. He has to know the Metzias. And that's why, for example, I came to appreciate a great Rav like Rav Tendler, who passed away in the last few years. Okay, sorry about that. We're having a Zoom problem. I'm not going to leave the meeting. No. So he knew what he was talking about. He was educated, so he was able to render opinions that were worth something. If you have someone who's too aloof, too disconnected from this world, doesn't know what's going on, so he's not going to be qualified. However, and this is important, a Navi is different from a posek. Remember, to decide halacha, please join us. To decide halacha, you have to be in this world. Lo b'shamayim hi. Halacha is decided using normal intellectual and legal methodology and a system, and it cannot be. You can't rely on, let's say, a person says, "Ko amar Hashem," this is what the halacha should be. This is an old sugya. However, for Musar, with regards to how we should behave and our outlook, we do listen to the Navi. And every now and then, the Navi also has override, saying, I know the halacha is this and that, but this once we have to do this avera because that's what God wants, or God has told me we have to violate this. The Navi and the Posek are entirely different, or the Navi and the Chacham are working in different systems altogether. And that's why, by the way, it's perfectly legitimate that the Navi be, according to some, a Gentile. It is perfectly legitimate that the Navi is a woman, for example. It is not so with regards to a Chacham. A Chacham is usually a Jewish man, and an adult Jewish man who joins with other adult Jewish men to decide halacha. And that's the way Chazal have it. And they're, like I said, two different systems. And I would hope that someone who was there to rebuke, let's say, the tzibur, and I guess give us direction, moral direction, and tell us about our midos, and tell society where it is supposed to go, that is good if you have a person who is detached. Yes, such a posek, if he is the type of person who, I guess, is like Elisha Navi or Eliyahu Navi, comes back suddenly to society and discovers that there's automobiles instead of horse-drawn buggies. So Eliyahu Navi, that's not his business how to tell us the halacha in this case. If he wants to sit with other chachamim and have a discussion, then that's fine. But his job is to rebuke the people and tell them what they're doing, what is wrong with what they're doing, and how they're supposed to correct themselves. In that case, you need someone who's completely disconnected. And this is, I think, critical in our generations, especially what's going on in America. Even though we are celebrating an American holiday today with, we said Hallel with a bracha, many of us. Wink, wink, no. But we are proud, sort of our American heritage. I mean, just because that's how we were brought up. Even though we are Jews living in the land of Israel, and we raise our children to be Israeli, we cannot de-Americanize ourselves. And we come from a tradition that was essentially good, and now we see how that American civilization is collapsing in on itself because they totally got rid of things. I hate to quote one of the Chachmei Umos HaOlam. Last week I talked about the Tower of Babel. I heard just this week Dr. Peterson, who I like, all those other talking heads with whom I cannot stand, and I don't disagree with him, but disagree with them. But he said something wise. He said what I was saying about the Tower of Babel, and he added, and that's what God meant by, and v'navel Hasham sfatham. That's not a verb. The nun there doesn't mean we shall. Navelah means it shall. V'navelah is a past tense female singular verb, meaning become mixed up. And the vav is vav hipuch. I mean, it's like v'amara means she shall say. V'navelah means in their language shall become messed up. Dr. Peterson, if you were Jewish, he might be a rabbi. Dr. Peterson said that there's nothing more fundamental than the distinction, the natural and essential distinction between male and female. That is how God created man. That's what he says. He created man, Zachar u'Nekeva bara otam. And the Torah emphasizes that dichotomy. And that is the basis for basically everything. That's how the story of mankind begins, that there's two different natures, and man has to find his Ezer Kenegdo and get along with her, and together they build the world. Right? Man's job is to rule over the world, and the woman is the mother of all living things. Yet what they're doing in the West is their Tower of Babel society is basically destroying even the basic language. They don't even believe in the definition of Zachar and Nekeva anymore, man and woman. And that is what God is saying. When you have a Tower of Babel situation, what's going to break them down is when they can't agree with language anymore. That's why you need someone who is detached. And this, by the way, I guess is another of my I guess, my love for Haredi society. I live in a sort of Haredi area. I live basically a Haredi life. There are some things that we could criticize Haredi society, but they get it right because they're disconnected, and at least their kids aren't going to be influenced by these terrible ideas. It's not just a bad idea. Some ideas are bad. Some ideas are just not true. It's a lie. Everything they're saying now in the West, and sometimes it takes a Navi who's just disconnected and say, "What are you people doing? You're nuts." And yeah, that's why it's good that we have Haredi society and that Haredi detachment from things. I would honestly believe that while you do need poskim who do not have a Haredi upbringing because they have to know what they're talking about, they have to understand, how an elevator works if they wanted to talk about the elevator on Shabbos. But I do believe that the next Navi will come from them, or at least the Chardalniks, because they have that proper disconnection from this.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.